Hey 7th grade artists, how are we doing? I hope we're doing well. I can't wait to get started on this week's art project. But just to recap, last week we did animal eyes using texture and value and shading. So you had to build up that dimension coming out of your animal eyes. I'm sure they're turning out lovely because you guys are awesome artists. This week we're actually going to focus on Celtic art. So Celtic art is perfect for the month of March. So Celtic art actually originated in the Middle Ages and it has extreme ties to Christianity. They used a lot of repetitive patterns and knots and even animal forms to make their lettering more interesting. So for this week's project, what we're going to do is take your initial. So I hope you're ready to get started. Let's go.
Let's get started on our project. So before we begin our project, we need to gather our materials, which is a piece of white computer paper, some colored pencils, and a regular pencil, as well as a sharpener, because you'll need to sharpen your pencils. Before we get started on drawing, we need to fold our paper correctly. So we're going to fold edge to edge because we don't want to use the whole paper for this project. We just want to use half sheet. So once you have your paper folded, because we're only using a half sheet, let's take a pair of scissors and cut that sheet in half. This is the dimension of our paper, a half sheet. So our project is going to be focused on Celtic art, which had a lot of interesting knots and patterns and symbols to describe the person or family for which it was created. In addition to our materials that we've gathered, we're also going to need a ruler. The subject of our picture is going to be our initial, so you can either do your first initial or your last initial. For this project, I'm going to do my last initial, so an R. Before I get started on drawing my initial in the center of my paper, I want to give myself a border. So that means with my ruler, I'm going to take about 1/2 inch of a border. So I'm going to draw some lines. So one line going across. So using my ruler, I created 1/2 inch borders. Now what I can do is erase the lines that intersect because I want a nice clean border. So now that I have a nice border, I'm going to start to draw my initial. So I'm going to do R for Revelis. I'm going to place it in the center of my paper. I'm just going to sketch a nice R. Once you have your initial sketched, you want to create a box letter, which means we're just going around our initial. Now again, I can erase my inside lines. This is Celtic inspired, which means that we're going to take elements from Celtic art, but we're not going to recreate it completely because it is a very difficult thing to recreate. In their artwork, there was a lot of knots, which looks like different kinds of line work that are woven together to create the illusion of like a tie or a knot. So I'm going to do the same thing throughout my picture. I can choose to do it within my R, or I can choose to do it wrapping around my R. So this is where your creativity really comes in. So I'm going to do one inside of, so you can kind of think of like the infinity sign, but basically what you want to create is an infinite string that you knot within itself. I'm just having it go around itself. Just continuous loops. When you're drawing, you want to start with one line and then have the second line follow so that you have one continuous line. And so there I have an interesting kind of loop that wraps around itself. If you notice when I was drawing, I know it looks a little complicated. I would say try and draw it on a sketchbook first, and just play around with your lines to have them interlace and loop, like creating a road that's connected and squiggling around. So like I said, you can have some of the knots coming around your picture. So that means, again, we're just drawing strings that are coming around our initial. And maybe at the bottom, I can draw a little knot so they look like they're tied together. And so for this piece, I'm not going to draw something wrapped around. I'm actually going to box it off and draw something inside, like a braid. So always start with just one line and then add more as you go. And I could even add some smaller ones that follow the same direction. But there we go, I have my basic sketch. So for my background, I'm going to include 2 diagonal lines like across. And so then I would color each section a different color. As far as your border goes, I would like you to include one sort of pattern or design. So for my border, I'm going to do this triangle zigzag pattern. And so once you're finished with your sketch, you have your initial, some sort of knot, and then a background and your border. You can start to trace your lines either in a black thin Sharpie or a black thick Sharpie. Thin one would probably work a little bit better, but if you have a thick one at home, then you can use that. You can also play with the different thickness, right? So maybe I will outline this in thick Sharpie, but then my small details will be in thin Sharpie. Once you've traced everything in Sharpie and outlined all of your beautiful line work, you want to take a pencil and erase your pencil marks that are left over. So I'm going to start with my border first. I'm going to actually leave it black and white, and I'm just going to take a thin Sharpie and add some texture to my border. You can choose to leave it black and white as well, so pick a section to color black or to add some dimension and texture to it, just to make it pop a little. So my border is finished. Now I can start coloring my initial. So I want to pick a color palette that I really enjoy. So these are the colors that I personally enjoy the most. I'm going to start to color just my initial with these 4 colors. So I'd say stick to a color palette that you really enjoy. It needs to be at least 3 colors for your initial. Within the same family, they can be like I could just do, if I didn't want to use pink, I could use these 3 colors. Now I'm ready to go back in and go through my knots. So I'm going to use a combination of this golden yellow and a tan color to give it some shadows and some dimension. So first I'm going to color with my yellow. I'm going to do the same thing for this knot, but for this knot it's going to be a little different. To alternate, so my smaller pieces are going to be this tan, and then the bigger pieces are going to be that golden yellow. So my R is colored in pretty nicely. I'm very happy with it. A complementary color such as blue and green to create a background that's going to make my R stand out. have it. I have my Celtic inspired initial, a simple background, and then a white and black border to create a nice pop of color and some dimensions. Thank you so much, 7th grade. Have a great rest of your